guys, it is Tanya Target here, and I am talking to you from San Diego, and you'll see maybe in the background if you squint, really beautiful bridge. And of course I am at, I think it's called Paradise Point or Paradise Gardens. It is just gorgeous. I'm here for the LEAP program with Justin Livingston. Speaking of which, interview with Justin coming your way in just seconds. Justin's going to ask you some questions about what is it you are building. Are you a practitioner or are you building a platform? Are you better off building a platform? Now you watch Justin. This is such a, it is a very in-depth interview, and Justin appears, he starts the interview in full daylight and then he just ends up a little face in the darkness. The content is amazing, so I can't wait to share that with you. Now, if you have been enjoying this road trip across USA, Dr. T, of course, Tony Pennells and I have been road tripping across the USA, not on the Starship Enterprise, but of course we have been having lots of laugh and fun all the way, and all good rock concerts, Aussie Rise is a rock concert on the road, needs an encore. So if you have been enjoying this road trip and you would like to be part of this tribe moving forward beyond this road trip with more experts, more backstage passes to these key influencers and all the gold and the nuggets they share, watch out for what's going to be coming your way in the next couple of days. Meanwhile, enjoy this interview with Justin. Leave some comments below. I hope you get as much value out of it as I did. And thank you so much for watching. As Molly Meldon would say, I love you all. So very excited. Justin Livingston, thank you so much for agreeing to chat to me. And we're going to be talking today, of course, about joint venture partnerships, collaboration, and the very controversial but sexy topic of collaboration versus irrelevance.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Amen.
Okay, so yeah, cool. That's always a great start. So tell us a little bit about collaboration, what that means to you, and some of the joint venture partnerships that you have been involved in. Because in America and businesses in Canada, like where you are situated, it's very much a part of doing business. But in other countries that are behind the US, it's not so much. They're still playing a little bit of catch up. Mm-hmm. So before we dive in where we are headed with collaboration between entrepreneurs, where are we at now?
Well, the idea of collaboration, as far as when I think of it as like 4 different stages. And by the way, I'm not an expert on maturing markets and businesses and growth trajectories and all that stuff. I've been studying about it as much as I can over the last little while as our market matures and things are changing really rapidly. Though I always like to preface it by saying, hey, I've got a lot of ideas. And I've got some really educated guesses, but I've never actually lived through this myself. It's like, it's like I've been learning to ride a bike on the street. Now I'm going to, I can imagine what it might be like to take the bike out onto the back roads or whatever, but until I actually do it, I don't actually know. So this idea of collaboration, how it makes sense in my mind, okay, and just keep in mind, I just made this up, right? But I think of it in 4 stages. And the first stage of collaboration for me is if we think of, if we just think of entrepreneurs, let's just keep it simple, where entrepreneurs that have something in common, like either with their product or service or the market they serve, or there's some common ground amongst a set group of entrepreneurs where they can gather or collaborate with regards to best and worst practices. In other words, mastermind, share ideas. And the idea, what's that saying about a rising tide lifts all boats or whatever, like the idea that, in a given market, the idea that we can all win together or lose together, kind of an idea. And that I see as like the baseline of collaboration. And I think in the industry that we work in, specifically what I call the transformation space, though a lot of people have a lot of different names for it. Part of one of the downsides of a young industry is that sometimes it's missing some of the common language, can make it confusing at times. But I think that one of the things that we've done exceptionally well at is the first 2 levels of collaboration, and this first one being that we tend to gather and support and help one another with ideas and concepts, best practices, worst practices, a lot, like a lot. And one of the things that that I'm really proud of with regards to our space is that, you know, I believe that's a really powerful precedent or modeling that we're doing for the rest of the world, you know, about how business can be done in a really powerful way. So that's the first level. Then from there, the second level to me is when you share promotional efforts. So the idea, you know, in our space, what people call a joint venture, which to me, again, it's a bit of a misnomer. Like in more mature markets, a joint venture means a very more specific thing that I'll get to in a second. In our space, when people say joint venture, they typically, what they just mean is that they're promotional partners. And so it's like a sharing of clients, a sharing of audience, right? So let's say for my company, we'll put a lot of effort into attracting an audience that we can send a promotional message to. And for a select few of those people, they will become paying clients of ours. And for the rest of them, well, they either didn't really have the problem that we solve, in which case, you know, okay, they'll just stop listening to us anyway over time. That's no harm, no foul. The rest of them, for whatever reason, just not the right time or not the right personality or brand, like for some reason, they chose not to get their problem solved by us. And so now it's like, well, how can we still serve these people? Well, it's this win-win-win dynamic if we can refer them to somebody else who solves the same or a similar problem, but in a slightly different way or with a slightly different context or with a slightly different flair. And of course, there's a lot of leverage there with regards to, you know, things like ad spend. You know, if I have to pay money to advertise to a select group of people, but only some of them buy my stuff, well, I can recoup some of that ad spend if I then refer them to someone else. And as a community, we're all recouping some of our marketing expenses. So there's this idea of the market wins because they're getting exposed to a solution that's a little more their flavor. And, you know, one business wins because it's getting clients referred to it, and the other business wins because it's mitigating its marketing and advertising costs. So it's this idea of sharing promotional efforts that is a ton of leverage. And again, I think this is another area where I really tip the hat to our space, you know, which is, it's fun to say because I tend to be really critical of our space, more so than some, I think, in some areas. So in this moment anyway, it's feeling really good to say, hey, you know, tip of the hat to us, because there's some things that we've done really well. And yeah, I don't know if there's an industry, young or old, that exists that has had the amount of collaboration through promotional efforts that ours has. Maybe there has, and I'm just ignorant to it, but my goodness, if we do it a lot. And you know, it's like one of my favorite things to talk about. It's like I'll sit in a room with people like, you know, Lisa Sasevich and Bill Barron and Jeff Walker and Eben Pagan and Christian Michelson. And so all of these people who do very similar stuff to what we do. For anyone watching this, if you don't know me or any of those people, just the context here is we all do kind of similar stuff or serve similar. We provide similar solutions to a similar audience, put it that way. And multiple times per year, we get together and we plan how we can better support one another's businesses. Whereas in most other industries, young or old, instead of spending time with them, I'd be spending time with my own company, my own staff, and we'd be trying to strategize how to take business from them. Instead, we strategize on how we can send them more. How can we support them more? Like if we believe in what it is that they're providing to the world, whatever the transformation is that they're providing, how can we help them leverage and have a bigger impact? And I just think that's a so much more empowering stance. And yeah, I think that we've done an excellent job there.
I think if I might just interrupt you on that, I'm keen to hear the other, you know, two parts, of course, but if I just,
sure.
Someone watching that and they'll go, well, that's nonsensical to them. It's
totally.
nonsensical. Yeah. But I'm also thinking, well, what's the return on that? What's the return on collaborating? Obviously there's an abundance mindset there, but if you go beyond that and you go, okay, well, you're collaborating with people who are offering the same product. Obviously there must be a huge benefit from doing that, and that benefit offsets, you know, trying to work out how you can take customers from them.
Totally.
Answer to that, Justin.
Well, I mean, you can look at it, the way I was phrasing it is kind of like this altruistic, you know, hey, we're all helping each other, help each other, whatever. So there is that side of it. But if you look at the pure number side of it, you know, if you think of it, just think of, if I have, let's say I'm paying for some Facebook ads, let's say, and I'm promoting something and I'm getting people to click through. Of course, they have to opt into my email list. Maybe they watch a series of videos or they register for a webinar or something like that, and they get exposed to a sales message, and then some of them eventually buy. But what's the percentage, like, of all of the people that come into our circle and become a part of our audience? What's the percentage of those people that actually buy something from us and become active and engaged clients? I can tell you it's a very low amount. It's extremely low, like less than 1%. In fact, significantly less than 1%. So I don't know, you know, if I had to guess, I could look these numbers up. I didn't think of it before this call, but I would say, you know, our company does like a hair under 10 million a year. Like we for our space and what we do, we've reached a pretty significant level of business. And even at that, I would be willing to bet almost every cent that I own that we have had less than 6,000 total people ever buy something from us. If it is more than 6,000, it wouldn't be too far. Like, put it this way, it's way less than 10,000. Yet how many people over that span have come into, have been under our influence in some way, shape, or form? Well, it's many, many hundreds of thousands. So we're talking about like a quarter of 1% or less, like a tenth of a percent even, that have purchased from us over time. So what about all those other people? Like, how do we, okay, from the one, whether you want to look at it from a financial perspective or the altruistic perspective or both, how do we help those people? Because they didn't just come into our lap for no reason, right? They were responding to some message that was addressing a problem or a concern or something they're struggling with in their life. If we don't help them, well then, I mean, we can only assume they still have the issue. And secondly, we had to pay to get those people's attention. That, like, them coming into our sphere, that didn't happen by chance, and it definitely didn't happen for free. There was some cost that we incurred by getting their attention. So how do we mitigate those two concerns? Well, to me, the one that has the highest leverage is to refer them to somebody else. And it's the way that converts them into somebody's buyer faster. And of course, we get a kickback on that. They give us a commission, which is a no-brainer to them because there was no marketing costs up front, right? And so to me, it's just a huge win-win-win. And as far as marketing campaigns go, I mean, anyone who's if you're attracting clients in your business, then you know to be true that the easiest and most profitable conversion, like from a potential client into a client, is when somebody comes as some form of a referral. Like, in other words, if someone else has told them, hey, you should go talk to these people, or you should go work out here, or you should buy, you know, such and such, that endorsed referral is, you know, easily 10 times as valuable on average than someone who comes through like a paid media advertisement or something like that.
Yeah, it's that social proofing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I sat down I took my daughter to brunch yesterday, and the restaurant was full, and she turned to me and she said, "Mommy, this has got really good social proof in this restaurant."
Yeah, awesome, that's great.
Out of the mouths of babes. I said, yeah, you're right, it does.
Yeah.
So the four parts of that, we've got the mastermind and the sharing of ideas, and we've got the sharing of promotional efforts, the two remaining legs. Yeah,
so the third would be the sharing of infrastructure. Now you could argue promotional efforts you could argue that is an infrastructure. So I would say the next one, which is, it's a bit less obvious for people, or becomes to be a bit more complex, or I think I just lost a bit of light there. I might get up, and if I start to fade into the dark, the sun, I'm using natural light, and it's kind of fading behind my curtain there. Anyway, What was I just saying? Yeah, infrastructure. So sharing other resources is what that means. Like, so let's say, well, here's one that I was talking to a bunch of our promotional partners just recently. We were sitting in a room, masterminding about how we can better support each other through our promotional efforts. So handling these first two. And I was pointing out to them explaining this third concept and saying, well, hey, I was kind of asking them some leading questions about getting them to identify what were, like on very basic terms, what were the basic protocols that existed in their client care? So or customer service is another name for it, right? So they were discussing some of the protocols. You know, they have a ticketing system and they have outbound calls and then autoresponder email, like all the things that they do with their paying clients. And then, so as I was getting them to respond, I was kind of getting them to see how each one, as they identified one of the processes, everyone else was like, oh yeah, of course. Like they all had the same processes. They're all the same. And so the degree of variation of all of the client care departments that existed in all of our companies was very minimal, like, you know, not even worth discussing. They're almost identical. So then my point was, I said, well, why are we all paying independently to create that service? Like that's incredibly inefficient. We're all starting from scratch, doing it all on our own. Why don't we just have one entity that provides that service to each of us? That therefore we would be leveraged through the, if the entity only had one, one hiring process, one training process, like if everything was streamlined through one entity, that efficiency of infrastructure would allow all of us to be more profitable. There would be, instead of us paying, so let's say there's 5 companies, instead of us paying for it 5 times, if we build it once, for each of us, it would probably, or the total sum would, probably come to about 60% of the cost or so. So each of us would save, about 40% of our current cost to fulfill that function or to create that infrastructure in our own business.
And what was the feedback for that idea?
I've been talking about this for a couple of years in these types of groups, and over the last 2 years, it's only over the past, I would say, 6 to 8 months where people are really open to the idea, frankly, like, because before that, it was just too, I think for a lot of people in our space, it was a bit confusing. And frankly, people weren't feeling the pain of their inefficiency yet, because, in the Wild West phase, everything's so easy. People still remember, getting Facebook clicks for pennies, and, it's fairly new that people are starting to feel the pinch of like, oh, okay, what used to cost me 10 cents on Facebook now costs me $8. Like what I used to be able to get someone to sign up to my webinar for, $250, now it's like $16. And, I used to do $2 million launches and now they're only 1 million or whatever, or I used to be able to put 400 people in the room and now there's only 250. So, as people start to feel the, or let me put it this way, as our market matures, it's very recently that the ill effect of that inefficiency is starting to be felt. So now when I start talking about those things, that people's ears and their minds are a lot more open than they used to be, because they're actually, it's a real pain, not a theoretical one, Yeah.
And I want to dive into that. I want to dive into the efficiency of infrastructure. And I also want to dive into this concept of the Wild West phase that I've heard of you talk about before, but some people watching this and of course when I talk about in the article may not have. But before we do that, what's the fourth prong?
The fourth prong is can have definitely some crossover with the last one, but for me it's what a joint venture really is, and that's when two entities join their resources, infrastructure, whatever, could look a lot of different ways, but they're gonna join they're each gonna contribute resources into a pool to create a new entity. So try to think of an example. Well, you know what? There is some crossover with the last one, with the example I gave, like, because basically what I was saying to this group of people was that there's an opportunity for us, you know, to one of us, or we could find someone else to do it, or one of us in the room could kind of take a spearhead the project, but we could each contribute maybe some people, even some money or something, and to create a new organization that would provide client care or customer service as a service to the rest of us. So if that new entity was to be formed, like its own independent corporation, that, you know, using these other pre-existing businesses, that to me would be that's what a joint venture actually is in my mind.
So I guess the differentiator there would be between the infrastructure sharing of resources and the joint venture is the formation of a new entity.
It's the creation of a new thing. Yeah. That to me is the ultimate. That's the, I shouldn't say ultimate, because it's not like it's better or worse. Each of these four levels to me has its own context and its own merit and its own reason for existing. But to me, that's like the pinnacle of collaboration.
I've been hearing this, you know, this concept, you know, for a little while, not for 2 years, but I've been hearing it being talked about more and more, which is why I wanted to have this chat. And I put this to John Walker as well the other day. I mentioned to you before when we first sort of started chatting, and before we came on camera. And he said, you know, it's being talked about a lot, but the question is, who's going to be the sheriff? If you have these platforms and you're pooling the efficiency of infrastructure, and it sure as hell does make sense on a massive level, how do you police this and who gets to be the sheriff? I mean, I kind of think the how is a little bit of getting bogged down in the detail, but
totally. Yeah. To me, my answer to that is it's going to be one of two ways. Either there's going to be enough consensus in the collaboration and there will be some type of rhyme or reason to it, like some type of a democratic kind of a thing. That could happen. I doubt it. I think the sheriff is going to be whoever stands up and says, I'm the sheriff. Frankly, I think that's probably how it shakes out. Yeah, well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. You know, one of the things that I like to remind people, or I mean, assuming that I've heard it before, because, you know, let me back up a sec, because a lot of this stuff can be like, it can be higher level thinking, you know, than what a lot of people are used to, but especially if, for the most part in their business, they're the practitioner, right? Like they're the one that's on the front lines providing the coaching, or providing, they're the one running their events, or, you know, they're the face of the brand, all of these types of things. Well, they got day-to-day stuff to think about, you know, so sometimes they don't kind of step back and look at bigger picture stuff like this. And so in that case, sometimes this can be like a little bit, oh, you know, well, yeah, I guess I can see, but what do I do? You know, like, so it seems kind of confusing. So one of the things that helps me with regards to the creative process is the reminder that as markets mature, the consumer always wins. Like that markets they progress in favor of the consumer. So that'll be either convenience for the consumer, or the lowering of cost for the consumer, or things like that. And usually all of the above, you know, things usually as a market matures, just become a lot easier, a lot more efficient, and a lot cheaper for the consumer. Typically, what I mean by in all of my research, it's always the case, unless government interferes with like some industries, government jumps in and whatever. I don't want to get into a big political debate, because I'll end up ranting until I'm red in the face about that. But assuming government sticks to what they're actually supposed to be doing and doesn't try to interfere in people's everyday lives, then markets naturally evolve in favor of the consumer. So what I think about a lot, and when I think about, okay, well, you know, where am I taking our company next? Like, what's next for us? I like to think about, well, in our little industry, what currently doesn't work for the consumer? Like, what are the things that the consumer doesn't like? And start solving those problems. Because, or if you choose to, I mean, you don't have to do anything if you don't want, but I can assure you that somebody will. Those solutions will be solved for the consumer, and probably fairly shortly, because Everything just keeps happening faster and faster and faster and faster and faster.
So how does efficiency of infrastructure solve the pain point for, do you mean in terms of the consumer? There's two ranges of consumers there. There's the consumers who could be purchasing from the platform where the infrastructure is pooled. And then there is the end user consumer.
Yeah, well, so to me, it's both. So let's be clear, because I'm not sure, like for the viewer, I'm not sure what, you would likely know what terminology they know or don't know. I'm not totally privy to that. So here, if you're building some type of a platform in a market, so that platform can have one of two audiences. It's either gonna serve the consumers of that market, or it's gonna serve the practitioners of that market, or both. But I can tell you this, that if you're serving both, like Uber is a great example. Uber has drivers and it has the passengers. So the platform that they build, which I don't love using Uber. I love using Uber as an example because everyone knows what it is and it's so brilliant and simple in its concept. What I don't love about using Uber and other similar platforms is that people immediately think that, oh, a platform is a giant technology enterprise. It's like, no, it can be that, but it doesn't have to be that at all. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to have 5,000 employees to be a platform by any means. But anyway, if you are doing something where you're serving both the practitioners of a market and the consumers of that market, you're going to notice the big successful companies like Google and Facebook and Uber, they understand that that's the consumer. If it's a win for the consumer, it will automatically be a win for the practitioner, even though the practitioner doesn't know it sometimes. Like, in Facebook's case, they do so many things. Oh, we're getting an echo there. Sorry. How can I fix that?
Do I try and mute myself briefly?
Yeah, maybe. Thanks. I don't see any headphones around there. That would probably fix it. But if you look at Facebook, like they've done so many things that they'll change their platform and it'll to use common language. It pisses off the advertisers in the short term, but they're doing their best always to do things in favor of engagement of the consumer. That's what makes the platform relevant in the first place. If they weren't on top of that, there would be no opportunity for any of us, because us marketers and advertisers would have killed the whole thing years ago, because we're kind of like similar to a virus, we consume until we kill ourselves off.
It's a really interesting and important distinction, and a really important thing, to remember. And I think that in the entrepreneurial everyday struggle, that often tends to get forgotten and overlooked. So I think it's a really important point to emphasize. Just to come back, because I really want to dive into this efficiency of infrastructure and the Wild Wild West. Tell us about what the Wild Wild West is and how we have moved out of it.
Yeah, well, to me, the Wild Wild West is a phase of any market. So in my industry that I call the transformation space, I think we're coming out of it, but it still exists to a certain degree still. But anyway, it's the idea that there's more demand than supply, and anyone who wants to, what's the saying, like put up a shingle or whatever, like as long as you're willing to put yourself out there and say, hey, I'm in business and here's what I do, like the barrier of entry is nothing, basically. Like anyone can start. This probably 3 years ago or 3 or 4 years ago, I joked, I was on stage at an event one time and I referred to our industry as coaches who coach coaches to coach coaches, and it got a really big laugh or whatever. And it's funny now, a number of years later, I hear that all the time. People are constantly referring to our industry as coaches who coach coaches to coach coaches. and which of course I think is kind of cool. But you know, in the Wild West phase, anyone who wanted to say, hey, I help coaches get clients, or I help coaches be less stressful, or I help coaches build web pages, I help coaches do this, that, and the other thing. Yeah, the barrier to entry is like nothing, as long as you're willing to put up a URL on a web page, and you're good to go. Like, you didn't have to have a lot of credentials. You didn't frankly even have to know what you were doing. As long as you said you knew what you were doing, you know, building a nice little 6-figure practice for yourself was not difficult at all. And so now what happens after the Wild West phase of a market, again, this is just based on my observation and study over the last little while. Again, I have not lived through this myself. I like to keep reminding people of that. It starts to transition to what's called consolidation. And consolidation happens when the market becomes more mature and more savvy. So now what's happening relative to, let's say, 4 or 5 years ago, you know, a coach might have got exposed to our message, as an example, with my business partner, Callan Rush, and be like, hey, you know, you should do live workshops and come with us. We'll teach you how to fill them and make money and all this stuff. And people would either they thought that was an amazing idea, or they already were trying that anyway. But as far as they knew, we're the only ones in the world who help people with that. Well, 4 or 5 years later, people are now savvy enough that they can see our message, but they know that, oh, well, yeah, I can go with them, or I can go with them, or I could do both. Like, the supply and the demand aren't quite so out of balance now. People understand that they can shop around. They don't have to, you know, people know that just because, you know, someone says, hey, this, you know, it's cart closed today, opportunity's gone forever, that, you know, in 6 months, they're probably going to do it again, or, you know, whatever. Over time, the market just becomes more savvy.
And Justin, that's across all industries, though, as well.
Yeah.
Like, I know you use the example of yourself and Callan in the workshop space, but that's across all industries. And and you put that down to increasing use of the internet, increasing education of the user. What would you put that down to? That awareness that there's, you know, many people to select.
I think a lot goes into it, but I think that just saturation of content and of marketing messages, and I think that's what does it more than anything. It's like, you know, in our space, if you're going to coach coaches to coach coaches, well, there's a limited pool. I mean, the pools might be growing day by day, but at any given time, there's this many coaches, right? And we can only put so many messages into that bucket before the bucket starts to overflow, right?
Yeah. And I think, you know, I mean, in just in that example that you've given, in terms of that, you've got the demand and the supply, and there was, you know, more demand than there was supply. But now we've moved out of the Wild West. There's a lot of supply and there's a lot of choice.
Totally. And the market knows it. And that's where efficiency of infrastructure comes in, which we'll probably dovetail into shortly. But.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a natural segue. And I mentioned this to you before as well, before we come to this call. I was talking with Dr. Tony Pennells, and he thought of this. We were in a car trip across America where all great ideas come about, and we were talking about this concept of collaboration versus irrelevance. And I think you just made that point quite really succinctly when you talked about there is so much noise now. And because there is so much noise, the ability to cut through that noise, and there are so many marketing messages out there, one could argue, or one could put the question that if you are not collaborating, how are you going to be seen above that noise? And therefore, does that lead to irrelevance or obliteration? Or even
you know, here's there's a couple of examples I like to use. One is if you look at a very mature market, real estate. So real estate, it's easy to see there's a very clear division and clear distinction between the platforms and the practitioners. So the person who actually sells the house, or the person that shows up, they sell the house, they're handing out their business cards or whatever, I guess they sign the contract. I'm not a real estate expert, but that's the person who's actually selling the houses, representing the consumer. They are practitioners. They do the thing that they promise. A practitioner is one who fulfills on the very promise that they make. That's a practitioner. So now they don't use any of their own infrastructure. They associate themselves with a realty. Well, the realty can now provide infrastructure that's diversified across hundreds of thousands of realtors, so that they're able to run very tight margins on that. Like the margins on the realty is probably, I don't know, but being that it's a mature market, it's a platform, it's probably crazy low. Like, I don't know, they probably run like a 6% margin or something like that, making billions of dollars, whatever they're doing. And yet, but the realtor now, because they can tie into the efficiency of infrastructure that's created through a platform like a Remax or some other realty, they can run really high margins, meaning that they can, if they sell a home and if they make $100,000 commission selling a house, they're going to keep a pretty decent share of that $100,000 because now hang on, let me complete my thought there. I'm talking a bit too fast. Because they're utilizing infrastructure that's much more efficient, therefore it's not costing them much to utilize. Now, can you imagine if I just got my real estate license yesterday, and I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to start selling houses here in Vancouver where I live. Can't wait. So excited. And I got my business cards. I'm ready to go, ready to make my signs and everything. But you know what? None of these realty, I think I'm going to create my own realty called Justin Livingston Real Estate. My business it'll last less than a month. I can't compete because if I have to invest in creating my own infrastructure, the only way for me to do that, the only way for me to survive, I'm going to have to make up that margin somewhere. So now I'm going to have to go out and try to provide the same service into the market, but charge way more for it. How can I possibly compete? How can I go up to someone and say, hey, good news, I'm going to sell your house for you at a 20% commission when the person right beside me is going to do it for a 4% commission? You know, and some people, and this is going to happen in our space, I can actually dovetail into some interesting things that, you know, people might think is interesting. Anyway, kind of behind the scenes stuff in our industry that people wouldn't know otherwise. But
yes, please.
Yeah. So the idea that, you know, and people will get into crazy stuff, like they'll say, oh, this happens all the time. You know, people actually teach other people that, hey, you know, people don't buy what it is you do for them. They're buying you, you know, it's you, you're the personality. Come on. That is like, that just bugs me to no end. People don't buy people. No one's ever bought me. I'm not for sale. Like, I have methodologies and services and things that can alleviate people's suffering and their, you know, business sense to whatever degree they feel that suffering. That's end of transaction. I'm not for sale here, right? But anyway, my point is that people, when I talk about the idea that, hey, whatever it is that you're doing in the coaches arena and the transformation space, somebody's going to come in and do that at a 10th of the cost that you're charging. And people will say, well, they can't do it like I can do it. Okay. And maybe, but is the way you do it worth 10 times the value? And even if so, what is it about what you're doing? Because if you look at more mature markets, like I'm trying to think of an example, like, I don't know, maybe jewelry or something like that, like, or airlines is a really competitive market, right? So is there, like, you can have a distinction in your brand that allows you to charge more, like with vehicles or jewelry and clothing. You know, people will pay a premium for a certain flair or flavor, but whatever that flair or flavor is, there's only one. Do you understand what I'm getting at? It's not like you can't just make something up. Yeah. So I'll give you a good example is that in our space, almost everyone charges $19.97 for what they do. Okay, so where did that number come from? Does anyone have any idea? It was actually, sorry?
It's a great question.
Yeah, it actually came from a process that's very illegal, actually. I believe the term is collusion. It was back in the very beginning of our space. I'm not going to name any names. I don't know, maybe I shouldn't even be saying this. I don't know, but a group of people that I know very well. I wasn't a part of it at the time. I hadn't quite earned the right to be in the room yet at that time. But anyway, they decided that they were going to basically they created an industry, but they had it amongst themselves an agreement that no one was going to sell anything for less than $2,000 in 1997. But they were the first people to turn around and teach everyone else how to do what they were doing. So everyone just modeled a price point. Well, how is that in any way, shape, or form a win to the consumer? It's a made up, like it doesn't have, the tuition is not, regardless of how people feel about their service, or, you know, been in so many masterminds where everyone's like, oh, you know, come on, girlfriend, you charge more, charge what you're worth. It's like, what? Those days are like, if they're not already dead, they are dying very, very quickly. You know, because the money that people are asking to invest, and this is in any market, in the Wild West phase, it's not tied to anything. It's all made up, right? But one of the things that I'd be willing to bet a large amount of money on is that a lot of the things that all of us do in our space already, a lot of, you know, coaching coaches to coach coaches, whatever. There's going to be a platform or a series of platforms that are going to do that exact same thing. Whatever it is I'm teaching, whatever it's Callan or Christian Michelson or Jeff Walker or Lisa Sasevich, whatever. All of that will be available to people at a fraction of the investment. And the only reason I say that is because it's happened in every other market that's ever existed. So I'm pretty confident that, or at least again, in the studying and research that I've done, that appears to be the case. So I'm pretty confident that it will happen in our space.
Yeah, it is interesting. And as you were saying, you've seen it, or you've been talking about it for the last couple of years, but only now people are listening because the pain point is becoming, you know, substantial. So there's going to have to be a pivot and a move.
Yeah.
I think this is a given, but I'd like to hear what you have to say. The creation of the platforms, do you see this as a necessary evolution in collaboration for entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I do. And I'm going to ask, like, 1 second. I'm going to open the curtain a bit because I'm losing one more light. Luckily in here right as we were starting. So anyway, yeah, because to me, at the end of everything, to me, it comes down to the consumer. Like it's going to be the demand of the consumer, and it's just a matter of when, with regards to someone or some group or some collaborative effort behind creating efficiency in such a way that we can actually deliver to the market what's more in their favor.
And how involved do you see this? I mean, if I could just use, you know, obviously when, you know, I've had discussions about this in terms of from research and just as an example, I mean, I see from, you know, I've only been in the online space a very limited time, only since July of last year. And I've seen in that time the number of people struggling with all the different moving parts that there are to get into that online space. You know, there are, you gave the examples before, if you've got 5 different companies, you know, they've all got to hire 5 different VAs or 5 different Facebook ad managers, and you've got, you know, 5 different ways to process things. And getting in online, there's all the moving parts with landing pages and lead magnets and Facebook ads and webinars and so forth. Do you see these platforms as potentially taking away those headaches to that degree, where at the moment, if you're, or for an entrepreneur who's relatively new in business, they probably can't afford to have a full-time VA, but they need to have one for a few hours a week, or they can't afford to have a kick-ass Facebook ad manager, so they're struggling to do it themselves. Whereas if there was to be a platform, or they were to collaborate and get together, then you could have 5 or 6 entrepreneurs with one full-time kick-ass Facebook ads manager who would get to know those 5 groups. I mean, do you see it going down to that minute detail, or what does it look like to you?
I do, but I see it going even further than that for some. And this again is going to be where I think it's going to take a lot of people looking themselves in the mirror and being really honest with themselves about what do they actually want. Like what do they want? What are they here for? What's their purpose? Because in our space, one of the downsides of it, and one of my pet peeves, is the over glorification of entrepreneurialism. And because, I don't know, whatever, it just comes out in a lot of different ways, where the idea is that that entrepreneurialism is better than that being an entrepreneur is X, Y, and Z, and not is in, you know, having a job, a 9-to-5 or whatever is lesser than or lesser pursuit. And I don't know that people actually believe that. Like when I say that, for someone to watch this video, they're like, well, no, that's not true. How can an entrepreneur be necessarily better than someone who's not? Like that's a ridiculous statement.
I would agree with you. There is that view out there.
Yet we say things like that in our space constantly. It's crazy. So anyway, because of that, I think that a lot of people are starting their businesses and whatnot, and taking on this label of entrepreneur when it's not actually who they are, nor what they want to create. And there's fantastic news for those people, because up until now in our space, it's in the Wild West, you've had to be creating your own infrastructure and stuff like that. Well, in the very near future, I believe you won't have to at all. So not only would you be able to do what you were saying, like to pool and take advantage that way, but one step further would be to essentially just be a free agent or an actual contractor that ties into existing platforms that provide the client, that provide the opportunity for you to do whatever it is that you do. So an obvious example would be someone who just wants to, you know, be a life coach or whatever. Well, there's going to be plenty of opportunities of companies that are providing that as a service, that are no longer like a personality brand. It's not a person providing the thing. It's an organization of coaches. And now the downside of that from a practitioner perspective is that they kind of lose their, a lot of your autonomy and stuff like that. But you just have to be intelligent about it, because this is a lesson I learned my very first business years ago. Learned it, was so grateful. And then as it turned out, I didn't really learn it because I made the same mistake again, had to relearn it. And twice had companies collapse from the same mistake. The mistake was that I had a single supplier for a necessary intake into my company. And so what happened in both cases, once was, even the second time I did it, even though I learned it the first time, or supposedly learned it the first time, I had this one supplier who was so much more profitable than so I cut ties with all the others so I could put all of my resources into the one. A person on my team did something they shouldn't have done. They were stealing information of women that they thought, this guy that thought these girls were attractive or whatever. So he was taking their information and calling them after hours trying to get dates. Needless to say, as soon as the supplier caught wind of that, overnight that supply got cut off. I had a team of, 28 or so sales reps wiped out overnight because I had no business. I had no income coming in. I had no commissions to pay them, lost my, anyway. So why am I rambling on about this? Well, for a practitioner, so let's say you're a coach, the way to get the benefit of everything that you're looking to get or think that you're going to get out of being an entrepreneur would just be to realize, hey, wait, I'm the one with the actual value here. I'm the one that actually provides the very service that's being promised by these platforms. You then just associate yourself with multiple platforms. Then you've got your bets hedged. So it'd be like someone who wants to make money driving their car. Well, if they're just associated with Uber, there's risk there. But if they associate themselves with Uber and Lyft and DoorDash and a handful of others, if anything happens to one of those, they're fine. They're not even, it'd be like an overnight kind of a blip. They just allocate some of their time elsewhere. They're golden. So The great news, I think, is that for people who are clear on what it is that they actually want to do, like, so for a coach who's just like, you know what, I just want to coach. I just want to be either face-to-face or whatever, you know, like this over Zoom. I just want to be with people and serving them and making a difference for them in their life with whatever your expertise is or whatever. The opportunities of the near future will be for you to just do that. An example, again, the real estate space. People who just like to be with people and sell homes, that's all they do. There's no need for them to do the rest because they can tie into existing infrastructure or platforms that provides it for them. Another one is a great example I like to use is my massage therapist. When I show up to get a massage, she's the one that greets me at the door. You know, I go into the room, I get under the blanket. She's the one that rubs my muscles. But everything else is all infrastructure that's provided to her through other, or she doesn't own the, she doesn't own nor lease the room, even the computer, the desk, the automated service to book the appointments, the transaction platform for me to pay at the end. Goodness, the piped in music, geez, like the supplies, the oils, none of that is hers. She doesn't lift a finger or put any thought or time or attention into any of that. It's all provided through other, it's all existing infrastructure that is utilized through multiple massage therapists. Therefore, they only do what they love and their profitability is maximized.
So then the next obvious question would be the how. There seem to be a couple of different levels of this though. I mean, you were talking before about, you know, when you were sitting around in mastermind groups talking to your colleagues about the sharing of resources. There's, you know, at a small scale, you could get a bunch of entrepreneurs who just get together, half a dozen, who form some kind of an agreement where they start to share things. And then you've got the actual creation of platforms where you can be a free agent and you can go and get what you need from each of those platforms. Would that be a fair interpretation, Justin?
Yeah, I think so. And, you know, I think, well, first of all, I don't think that any of this, anything that we're talking about here today needs to convey any type of panic to anyone. What I mean by that is I don't think that anyone who watches this recording, that there's anything they have to do right now. I don't believe that's true. I believe that what would empower them the most that they can do right now or in the very near future would be to sit down, have some alone time in a nice quiet place or whatever it is for each one of us that allows us to be introspective and reflective and all that. And just to be clear on what is it that I actually want to build. You know, you know, Tony Pennells, of course, and he, in my LEAP group, man, I charge a lot for people to be a part of that community. And so I make, you know, whatever, make a lot of money facilitating that group. But I think I would make more money if I could somehow figure out how to get paid every time Tony asks somebody, what are you building? You guys, and it's so true because what's, you know, at the end of the day, once you're clear on what is it that you actually want to do, then you have to, I believe at some point you have to make a decision. Is it a practice? You know, are you doing the thing that you promise? Like whatever the fulfillment of what's being promised, are you attached to doing it? And if so, you're a practitioner. Yes, now you know. And that's what you should build as a practice. And practice needs to be, the function of a practice from a business perspective is to have a crazy high profit margin. And the way that you do that is through utilizing the efficiency of outside infrastructure. That's how you keep your costs to a minimum. You keep the highest amount of money that you make. That's a practitioner. The other side is to create a platform. Platforms typically do not have super high profit margins, but they generally are more scalable, usually. And in the building of a platform, I've boiled it down to 3 different types. You know, just to get people's creativity going, like, well, I don't know, platform, is that what I want? Like, if you're not attached to the fulfillment of what you do, like an example, a realtor, or a massage therapist, I mean, they're attached to the fulfillment of what they do. They're clearly a practitioner. That's what they're here to do. If you're a coach who just loves coaching, well, then you're a practitioner. If you are more on the entrepreneurial side, actually, and you love building and scaling, and if that actually is what you're here to do, awesome. My recommendation is to go the platform route. If you try to be a practitioner, it's not going to work out so well for you. So the platform route, the way I see it is, you either want to provide services for the practitioners in your space. So like an example would be, well, as someone who creates an agency that is producing Facebook ads for coaches. Okay, that would be an example of someone that could be a platform because they're providing a service to the practitioners of that same market, right? That's the first category that's, again, I'm just to be clear, I'm just making this up. This is just based on my own observation. The second is to provide opportunities to the practitioners in the space. So that would be, to actually start a coaching business as opposed to a coaching practice. Those are very different. If you're starting a coaching business, my highest recommendation is to make sure you're not doing any coaching, because if you are, you're going to be dead in the water. You don't. I had a great conversation with this gentleman who was he was a friend of my business partner's, and he was considering hiring me to be a one-on-one like coach for him, which I don't do that, so it didn't work out that way. But
you have a light handy? Did you want to hit the light switch?
Let's try this. Does that help?
Yeah.
Does that help?
I feel like we're at a campfire.
Oh, it did help.
Yeah, it did help.
Whoa,
yeah.
That's too bright though. There.
Thank you.
That's funny.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, it's like it's past 8 p.m. here. It's getting a little dark outside.
Yeah, sorry. Won't hold you for much longer.
Where was I? Oh, so we're having this conversation. So this guy, awesome vision. So he's got this. Essentially, it's a building that he leases in this town in Colorado, and they. I forget what it's called, but it's basically like it's a centralized, it's a community where they've got all this different like personal and spiritual growth stuff that's going on, right? But it's in a physical space, and they do events there like every day of the week, different evenings. They either play different relational games, or they might have little seminars and workshops or whatever. And they have maybe a 2-day event on the one weekend a month or something like that. But it's very community based, and so everyone in the town can come and go whenever they want. Maybe they do some yoga classes in there too, whatever. Now what's going on? So anyway, cool idea, right? So now, but he wants to do these in cities all over the US and then all over the world. And I said, I think that's a great idea. But I said, well, how attached are you to running the one you're running now? He's like, oh, I love it. I know we're building systems and structures here, and then I can create other ones because they can just use the same protocols that I'm doing, stuff like that. And I said, that's not going to work. That is a bad idea. I said, here's the thing. If you want to create multiple, like that's a huge project that someone has to spearhead. If that's going to be you, then that's all you can do. To the degree that you're going to try to also run one yourself, forget it. You're just going to run yourself into the ground. If this is going to be everything that it can and be as efficient as it possibly can to provide these individual profitable centers across the US and the world, you have to create it so that if you do want to run one yourself, it has to be purely optional. Like if you have to run one, the whole venture will fall apart. And the same is true in a coaching. If you're trying to build a coaching business and you have to be one of the coaches, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. You're going to be like everyone else out there that's, post Wild West phase right now, that's making $250,000 to $500,000 a year in their business. running themselves into the ground, trying to grow and scale their company. Eventually, they burn out, they stop, they turn around with their tail tucked, and they go and do something else because it's just not possible. It's not possible to be to build a platform while you're being the practitioner. What you can do, if you are interested in both, is you can build, once the platform's functioning, you can choose to be a practitioner in that platform. Like whoever started Uber, well, now that it's developed, they could go be a driver if they want. Nothing's stopping them. But if they were a driver from day one, that company would not exist today.
So for those, well, you just become one of the drivers, you just become one of the coaches, you just become one of the consultants.
Yeah.
But it's not reliant upon you for it to work. So there might be those, and I'm very mindful of your time, so thank you for being so generous with it, but just very mindful of that. For those watching this, they might go, okay, well, I want to build a platform. What's the next step? Yeah.
Well, I think you gotta have the idea. I think it starts with an idea. I just went really blurry there. Sorry. Yeah, it's got to start with an idea. So I gave a couple of kind of macro. I think there's three. Either you're providing a service to the practitioners, you're providing opportunities for the practitioners, which I would say, that's like an Uber or, Airbnb is a great one. Another example. Again, these are massive companies. It doesn't have to be a massive thing. But the third one that I see is, I call it promise at a discount. It's kind of a catchy name. It makes sense to me, but it's a bit of a misnomer. But if you think of Walmart as an example, it's like, to me, Walmart is a platform because they don't have to produce or fulfill on any of the things that they sell. They're basically, they're a reseller, right? But why it is that what was so relevant to them, let's get this going a little better, is that they're able to provide the same things that people were currently getting elsewhere, or the similar things, but at a significant discount, right? But a discount doesn't only have to be financial. It could be in energy invested. Like it can be about convenience as well. Netflix is a great example of that. They came in and wiped out an entire industry just by providing the exact same product, but creating a platform that just did it in a much more convenient way. Oh, you don't have to drive down to Blockbuster anymore. We'll just send it to you. They mailed it originally, but man, they were on top of it. They knew so many other companies would have realized, hey, we hit a home run here. We're mailing out, our business is mailing movies. But if they had stopped there, they'd be dead today. But they knew that it's like, how does this a win for the consumer? Where does this go next? How does the consumer continue to win? Well, it's like, what if we didn't have to ship it? What if we just streamed it right into their house? So that's what they built. Brilliant.
It is brilliant. And you're right, it did wipe out an entire industry.
And I think for people that are in the transformation space, if they think that that's not a possibility for some 25-year-old kid to come in here and completely change the entire industry, if they don't think that's a possibility, I think they're incredibly naive.
There's also, of course, scope here for teaching the creation of producing or creating platforms. Is that something that you are looking into or doing?
No, I mean, I wouldn't feel that I'm qualified to do that. I've never done it. I'm in a project right now where we're creating our first platform. But goodness, this is completely new terrain for me, for sure.
And you were saying before, just winding up, but you were saying before, and also I'm going to get you to share your details so people want to connect with you. They know how to do that, the best way to do that. Sure. You said some background discussions, some discussions that have been happening behind the scenes.
Oh, no. Well, one of the things I was thinking of, I mentioned it already, it was the whole collusion around the pricing.
Oh, yeah. I have heard that before. I had heard that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of funny, and now it's like, there's an entire community of people that believe that's the value of something, right? Like they'll sit and give each other advice and say, oh, you have that many modules? Oh, that program's worth what? No. Yeah, that was all made up years ago by a couple of smart gentlemen. But
So
that's,
just,
you know, that's one of the things. If you look at it, I think it's, okay, if we sell a program, like the programs that I offer, sorry, I'm going blurry there. Are they worth $2,000 to someone? I give someone a bunch of information and they can go to use it to do X, Y, Z. Well, yeah, technically if they do the thing and they get the ROI, whatever, I'm sure they're fine. I know I've paid way more than that for information, and I'm so glad, you know, that I did. But if we look at it, if we look at it from a cost of goods sold, like it's ridiculous. You know, it's information. And I mean, more and more and more information is free. That's the context of our, like, for anyone who thinks that they can, that thinks they have information they can give to someone, that someone can't find that information, or, you know, something very similar that will solve the same problem for free. Again, I think you're naive. So if you think that there's going to be a market for you to continually sell something for $2,000 that people can find on their own for free, you're going to be fighting an uphill battle very soon. That's my belief. So I think that our market is ripe for someone to step in and start, you know, this idea, you know, a Walmart type of an approach, or a Netflix type of an approach, where they're providing the information at a huge discount.
so you mentioned you're building a platform. What's the platform you're building?
That one. The one I just described. Yeah. That's the idea. I won't go into too much detail because I'm still in the design phase of it, but that'll be the premise. You know, I'm looking to solve it. Like, I look at it from the consumer's perspective, right? Like, what is it right now? The consumers in our space, what do they not like? What are the things they complain about? Because those are the things that will get solved over time by somebody. If it's not me, somebody will do it. What do they not like? Well, people don't love that the tuitions for programs are so high. You know, every time we do a campaign, we're flooded with responses from people who really want what it is or whatever, but just the idea of paying $2,000 for it doesn't make any sense. People don't I mean, okay, I want to be careful with this because I'm a huge fan of launches, and we do a lot, and we help a lot of people. We made, I don't even know how many millions of dollars through online launches. And there's one thing that people don't like, or the consumers in our space don't like, is that they only get access to solutions on the timeline of the buyer, as opposed to when they actually need it. So can you imagine?
Yeah, timeline of the seller.
Yeah, can you imagine if you had like I don't know, like you had the flu, and you went to the doctor, you know, because you wanted the flu medication, and they're like, oh yeah, you know, it's the middle of summer, and they're like, oh yeah, good thing, we're doing our launch for that in November, so it just
That's hilarious.
no, I want the flu. I have the flu now. You know, I want access to this right now. So again, I think as the market matures, that, you know, someone, if you're going to hold back and say, well, I'm not going to supply that right now, you know, someone else will, and it's going to negatively impact your business. Now, to me, there's still, I don't want to say, you know, bad things. I love launches, but to me, the real purpose of a launch, it's not the way we do it in our space. We've gotten away with it in the Wild West phase, where it's like, it's not really a launch. It's just like you just reintroduce things annually, but it's not a new thing, right? Whereas if you look at like Hollywood movies, they do a launch when the movie comes out the first time. It's not like we see a launch for Forrest Gump every year. That doesn't make any sense. Once it comes out, if people want it, they can have it. You know, it's not like Apple doesn't release the iPhone 4 every year. They release it, you know, they do one launch for it. And then the next launch is when it's the 5, and then the 6, and then the 7, right? When it's a new product. And I think, again, if people are thinking that that's not going to apply to our space as it matures, again, I don't know anything, but I think that those people are being naive. That's what I believe. So those are a few of the things. The platform I want it to be. The idea is that it will be entirely assessment based, so that people people are given access to the information and the mentoring and they're given access to what they need when they need it, as opposed to whenever it happens to be for sale.
And when is that platform going to be launched for the first time?
Yeah, I'm hoping to have it done a little over what's called a minimal viable product, which basically means that the smallest version of it that consumers will appreciate and accept, basically. To have that ready to launch, I think it's a year and 2 or 3 months from now, 15 months from now, something like that.
And Justin, I mean, I'll get you to hang on the line if you wouldn't mind, just after we end the interview officially. But for those who have been watching and enjoying and would love to know more about that platform when it's released, or other ways to get in contact with you, what's the best way, website?
Yeah. I don't even know off the top of my head. I should have came to this call prepared with that. I know I have a Facebook page called Justin Livingston Lucrative Luminary Training. Lucrative Luminary Training is the name of my company. And you can always email me, justin@lucrativeluminary.com. I think those would be
And Justin, we can chat, and you could just send me the best URL and I'll put it in the comments as well.
JustinLivingston.com. Check that out. That's a website with this face on it.
You're fading into the darkness. Thank you so much. You've been so generous with our time.
Hey, yes, it was fun. Fun chat.
Yeah, really, really awesome. So, thank you so much. And if you just wouldn't mind hanging on, that would be really cool.
I will do just that.
I encourage you to go and connect with Justin. As you can see, he's an absolute visionary, and I put it out there and say that if he sees it and he calls it, everyone should really be paying attention and start squirming in your seat, get a little bit nervous, and go and have that quiet reflection time and decide what is it you are building and what is it that you love to do. Meanwhile, thanks for watching, and I will talk to you very soon.